Hello, welcome to episode 2 of our OneDashboard video series. I'm very happy to have with me today Joel Harris of Navigate Management Consulting. Welcome back, Joel.
Thanks, Brad. Always great to talk with you about this subject.
It is. It's a very, very exciting time for us here at Solutions 360. This, I think, is one of probably the biggest innovations we've had, maybe even in the history of what we've been doing with our systems and consulting and everything else. You've been following this type of work for a long time. And I think, when we first met, I think it was at an NSCA event. It probably took us 2 minutes before we were deep into discussion about process and planning and forecasting. Maybe you could just give me a little bit of background on how you came upon this whole concept of forecasting by planning.
So I have been privileged to be a professional manager for institutionally held companies. And so when you work for a shareholder, they're always demanding that you forecast accurately what the results are going to do, especially if you're working for a Fortune 500, Fortune 50 company that has to aggregate their results. So the most important element of success as a manager for a public company is your ability to forecast. And so when I joined, and I've been working in systems integration businesses since 2000, the challenge is how do you accurately forecast in a project-based world? And I have a bit of a math background and did a lot of causal analysis to try to figure out what were the correlations to predict out what the net income was. And the closest I could come was actually looking at backlog at any given period to figure out what we would actually be able to recognize as revenue as we went forward. And for me, this was a journey that started with trying to forecast the month-end results accurately in a project business, which is highly variable depending on how customers change their schedules or how equipment delays show up. And so I honed that methodology, that's where you and I intersected to talk about how we could talk about using Solutions 360 as a planning tool as opposed to a reporting tool. And that's where life gets really exciting for me.
Yeah, the overlap was really interesting. It's like we came together and filled in some missing pieces for each side. We had done a lot of work on forecasting projects, and we had done a lot of work on forecasting recurring revenue, and we did it to a very detailed level. Mm-hmm. And then we built cash flow forecasting, where we came on the concept of recurring or fixed costs, whatever you want to call them. But you've got a pretty good idea of what those recurring costs are for any company, and they're pretty steady. What we hadn't done is thought about putting it all together and creating a picture. And I think that's when you and I had an epiphany in one of our discussions. It was like, well, we have all this information. You've got the concept of how to pull it together, not only to use those numbers in cash forecasting, but to do income statement forecasting or a break-even analysis. Mm-hmm. And that was the big aha moment. We said, wow, if we could put a picture together that we could look at for 60 or 90 seconds and really understand where this business is going with any deal of accuracy, that would be an incredible thing, wouldn't it?
Well, that was exactly right. I was so impressed with the tools you had that could talk about capacity planning and scheduling and all the key performance and dashboards that you had in place. And of course, you had to tie to cash flow. And as we talked about it, I said, well, as a business leader and a manager, I manage my P&L, or I think about my P&L, not cash flow. So we have great drill down capability, but as an executive, I don't want to have to look at 13 different reports to figure out where the month is going to end. I want a snapshot of where the month is going to end. And that's where you got excited, because you took my methodology. What I would do with my companies is I would force them to predict an income statement at the end of the month, and then use that to adjust our plan. What are we doing to hit the targets that we want? And I think it became kind of blindingly obvious. You already had the elements in the cash flow statement. You already had the core dashboards that rolled up to it. What we were missing was just that simple presentation of an income statement that would allow an executive, an owner, to say, are we going to achieve the results that we want to achieve? And instead of being kind of a victim at the month end, 10, 15, 20 days later, when the accountants close the books, we're actually projecting and predicting our business and then changing the elements that we can actually change during the month to drive our business to success. And all of a sudden we realize that the issue is not the fact that we're in the project-based business. The issue is that we have to be able to adjust in order to achieve our targets. And we have that flexibility if we know what we're doing. So that unifying piece of a projected income statement was the breakthrough for us in thinking about how do we put the great tools that were already in place. And so there's nothing new, right? That's the exciting part of Solutions 360. We didn't write a new module. We didn't implement a new workflow. We don't have a bunch of data analysis that has to go. When I've implemented this at other companies, I'm pulling data from 5, 6, a dozen different reports, and I'm trying to pull all my labor forecasting, my utilization, and I've got all these reports, and I'm trying to triage them and put them into one place. And the information is already there in Solutions 360. We just had to figure out how to present it in a unified way that made sense. And I think that idea of projecting an income statement was the epiphany for us.
Yeah, very exciting. You know, it's ironic. One of the first customers that I presented this concept to, and I showed them an early version of the OneDashboard. I was all set up to do the demo. We were going to have our meeting, and I got a message from them very shortly before we were going to do the demo. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to postpone. We have to scramble to get our invoicing out and figure out what we're going to make this month because, you know, it's down to the wire and we're worried about month end. It's that surprise effect that you talked about. That my financials are a surprise as opposed to a plan. And that is a real paradigm shift, isn't it?
That to me is if we can get the owners of this industry to think about how they're planning their results and then changing week by week as the month goes through. You know, one of my theses is a successful year is made up of 12 successful months. And so for me, the critical planning period is the next 30 days. And that's what the OneDashboard allows us to do. But then you took that idea and expanded even further because I'm making hiring decisions 3 to 6 months in the future. So when I then overlay my pipeline reports on top of what my backlog is, now I not only can plan and adjust successfully within the 30-day period, I now begin to have a longer planning horizon around hiring and making staffing decisions and expansion decisions or contraction decisions if it's necessary in the market that we're involved. Because in the put in place construction environment that we all operate in, we are affected by the capital goods markets as opposed to being able to control kind of the capital spending that's going on with our end users.
Yeah, very true. Now, let me ask you a question. I hear this all the time from the integration industry. I'm too busy to plan. My customers are constantly changing things. I can't do it. What do you say to them?
I recall when I first took a company in this space, and I was training project managers. I came from the construction industry, and I was training my project managers. And I said, Joel, this is worthless. You make us all this time coming up with a project plan, and the minute we write it down, it changes. So we're wasting our time doing this. And what they didn't understand was that there were many other people in the company who their day-to-day decisions on how they would shift things around would impact those other people. And so there's two important parts of having the data aligned is that you allow the rest of the company to adjust with you. So yes, you might be a great on-site supervisor who is doing the day-to-day dance that you have to do in this industry. But when you can't communicate a broader plan, you can't engage the rest of the company. And so you create inefficiencies all around you by the fact that you're very nimble on that one specific project. We talk about it, navigate. The issue is not the project. The issue is the portfolio projects that the company is trying to do. So my short answer is if you don't have time to plan, what you should do is plan on losing money because that's what's going to happen when you don't plan.
Great. Now, when we put all this together, we were trying to think up what we're going to call this. And of course, being a Lord of the Rings fan, the idea of this one dashboard that was kind of the one dashboard to rule them all came to light. The idea that this is where we start, you know, as an executive, as a business owner, this one picture is our starting point. But what's critical is then being able to drill into all of the other underlying data because the picture tells us where we're going, but it doesn't tell us how to change course necessarily. And that's where the rest of the reports and the rest of the information become very important. So what do you say we take a quick look at a OneDashboard? We'll just look at the picture and see what we can see in 60 seconds and go from there.
Let's do it.
Okay. All right, here we are, the OneDashboard. On the top, we have our break-even forecast, which is really a forecast of our income statement. We can see revenue, we can see expense, and of course, revenue minus expense is equal to our net profit. And on the bottom graph, we have our cash flow forecast. And there we can see cash in and cash out and our balance at any given time. And what's important is if you look at the dates, we are in sync. So we can see at any given time what our income statement is going to look like and what our cash flow is going to be at that same time to see if we can support the income that we've projected and the work that we've projected. So I'm sure you have some initial impressions, but why don't we save that? We'll come back and do another session. We'll dive into a little more detail on the OneDashboard and see what we find.
That sounds great, Brad. Look forward to the discussion.
So do I. We'll see you again soon. Thanks.